So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And like I said, this is a very interesting topic, but because most of the people who are looking at doing an MBA, and since we've been in this industry for so long, I know that a lot of you eye for a consulting role. And it becomes extremely important for you when you're looking at such a huge investment, such as an MBA, to have a very clear idea on why consulting, what are the kind of different skills required for consulting. There are so many myths around consulting. And what I want to do and what we want to do in this session today is just focus on giving you more clarity, more understanding. It is not about just giving you a list of, these are the consulting options and this is what you're supposed to do, but a little bit more insight to what people have or students or aspirants have in their mind, so that they can have a clear idea on whether they are cut for consulting or not, right? So, all right, so let's get started. So before we get started, I just wanted to give you a little bit of idea that a lot of people come with very different backgrounds and unique skills. In fact, each of you over here is from a different industry, different function, and a different role. And identifying whether you are fit for a management consulting role becomes a very important aspect. And for you to even identify whether this is a career that you want to pursue or you want to lead, right? So now that all of you are from different kind of backgrounds and different kind of industries, what do you think, what is, since you've been thinking about it, or maybe you have read about somewhere, what are the kind of myths that you have heard about consulting? What have you heard of? Anything, if you could type on, if you've heard that, only specific kind of people get into consulting, or you need to have some specific DNA for consulting. What is the kind of myth you have ever heard of? Anyone, you want to just type in on the chat window? What are the myths you've heard about consulting? Poor work-life balance. Well, let's see whether it's a myth or not. High-paying job. Yes, Idris, thank you so much. MBA fresh grads can get into consulting relatively easily. Okay. Only academically brilliant people get into consulting, get to travel a lot. Consulting requires a very good 10th, 12th and graduation scores. Okay, academics is what I think. Awesome. So I think what we want to do in this session today is focus on most of these myths that people have, and then look at how can people or you guys maneuver into something around consulting, and what are the kind of career paths, or what is the kind of career progression you can have if you're looking at consulting as a job role, and what is needed, or what is the work experience, or what is it that they would want, or how are they going to evaluate your fitment to a management consulting role, right? Jack of all trades, Anang, perfect, right? So before we get started, let me just introduce myself. I'm Shrikala. I'm the co-founder of Crackverbal. I have been working with students across different kind of backgrounds and diverse profiles for more than a decade now. I pre my entrepreneurial stint with Crackverbal, I would say my previous janam, I worked for HP for around 7 years. I worked for a technology startup before that. And over the years, I've worked very closely with students who have aspired to get into top schools. I'm also part of the ISB Goldman Sachs Fellow, 10,000 Women Entrepreneur Program. I'm also part of the Cherry Blair Foundation, where I do help or mentor women entrepreneurs across the world, especially small scale entrepreneurs, to help them with their business problems or challenges, right? So that's a little bit about me. I have with me my co-host Yash. So Yash, you can maybe introduce yourself and tell us about a little bit about your background so that we can take it ahead.
This is Yash here. Hello everyone. Happy Friday and good evening. This is Yash here. I have 16 years of experience in the overall, out of which 10 years is in the industry. And 6 years is in consulting. I have been born and brought up in the real estate space. My father was an architect, so ever since I could remember, I have been running around construction sites. I specialize in smart buildings, IoT connectivity, and corporate real estate. Prior to consulting, I spent 10 years in the industry doing that job in various capacities. I also had a startup of my own. And then after ISB, I moved into construction full-time with Nagarjuna Construction Company as a part of the Blackstone portfolio operations transformation team. followed by Deloitte Consulting for about 5 years, and I've been as a senior, business strategy manager in Accenture for about a year. And look forward to talking to you guys and interacting with you a lot.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yash. Welcome to our session. All right. So let's get started with the first and the foremost thing. A lot of people here talking about the first and the most important myth. Academics, a great academics is extremely important to land you into a consulting job, right? Yash, you have been through this journey yourself. You've been recruiting consultants too. Tell me how much truth is there to this statement, and how should people look at it?
So I think after doing your MBA, kind of start giving the answers that start with "it depends."
Especially being a consultant.
Especially being a consultant. So here are two things to consider. Number one is that there are two entries into consulting. One entry is going through your traditional MBA placement cell, where consulting companies come to recruit on campus, and then you get into consulting. And then there is another route into consulting, which is you're an expert in a field which has demand in the consulting world, and you're recruited as a lateral hire because you bring in that industry exposure and the relevant knowledge about the industry, not necessarily academics, that makes you relevant when speaking to the client. So let me answer this question. So the reason I said it depends is, if you are going through your standard MBA placement cell, there is typically a academic threshold, like you have for every entrance exam or every placement, right? So there is a reason for that. Our clients pay top dollar for the top brains because of the rigor in research, in methodology, as well as the rigor they bring in their analysis, right? And your high score in your MBA is kind of the litmus test that you will be able to survive a business world kind of a simulation, if you will. However, there is another route, which I said is the lateral route, where academics do not matter. Me, for example, I took the lateral route to get into consulting, and I don't want to talk about my academic score, but it was not the best. So to answer your question, it really depends upon when you are getting into consulting and how you're getting into consulting. I hope that answers that.
So there is also a myth, and this is also something that a lot of people talk about, that GMAT scores matter a lot when you are sitting for, say, a placement, or when you are applying for a consulting interview. Is there any truth to it, or is that something only few consulting companies look for? How important is it?
I have seen, at least on my campus days, there were companies which asked for 10, 12 GMAT, and I graduated from ISB, so obviously ISB score. But they're not putting it in an Excel sheet and filtering out people that are not in a particular threshold, right? So for example, the brilliant people sat for those company interviews, and there was a national level table tennis champion who had very nominal scores in 10th and 12th, but very high scores in ISB. Good scores, right? Not like top 1 percentile, but definitely top 10 percentile. He sat down for the interviews. There was an army colonel who sat down for the interviews. What they're looking for is that, are you able to perform consistently over a long period of time, right? Consulting is a marathon, not a sprint. So they're looking for that consistency in effort and not spikes in performance, and that's what they're looking for. But to answer your question, Shrikala, it is some companies that look into it, not all. I don't think it is a bare minimum criteria to get into consulting.
Got it. And I think to what you said, right, the rigor and the analytical skills that is required for consulting could be one reason why they believe that someone who has good grades, maybe during their MBA, could be a great fit for a consulting kind of a role.
It is a measure of you being able to handle multiple priorities at the same time.
Right.
And when I think there is a place over here somewhere that talks in day of life in a consultant, right? You are literally juggling multiple things at the same time, right? And in an MBA school, typically MBA school is a buffet, right? You have plethora of things that you want to do. You pick and choose what you want to do. So you're living in a high pressure environment. You're competing against some of the best minds in the industry, and still you perform, right? So that gives an indication that if I put you in a high pressure project tomorrow for 10 weeks and you have to churn something around, you're going to, dig the trenches and do your job.
Right.
And that's what matters.
Right. So coming to, the second aspect of it, connected to what we already discussed, right? A lot of people say that the learning curve is extremely steep in consulting, which is every day you are, from role to role, from project to project, what you need to understand in terms of the industry, the skills, everything needs to change, and you have to be extremely adaptable to focus on learning new things on a daily basis. How true is this, or what is the reason behind saying that learning curves is extremely steep in consulting?
I don't think the learning curve is steep. First of all, let's talk about two different angles, right? Let's keep in our mind that there are two ways to get in consulting: the traditional route through MBA placement cell, and then there's a lateral route. Okay. Irrespective of which route you come into consulting, there are training programs that actually help you teach how to think.
Right.
So, for example, in my previous firm, we had a 1 week training program where all of us were put in a hotel, like 150, 200 of us, and we were made to live the consulting life, right? So we had a presentation at like 6:30 in the morning. We had new data come in at 11 in the night and all of that, right? Everything, it was jumbled, but it was made in that way. So let me answer this question. You are taught how to be a consultant. You don't go in there and you're expected to be a consultant on day one. Right?
So there is a learning curve, but not that.
No, it is not. It's not. Yeah. Having said that, let's think about the other way into consulting, which is lateral, right? If you're getting into consulting laterally, they're hiring you because you have a niche skill or an expertise that you bring to the table that actually adds value to your client, right? That's the incremental value add that you bring to the table. Now, and typically lateral hiring would tend to happen at a senior consultant manager level, where there is some responsibility and some expectation of being a culture fit to the consulting firm that you're joining. So there is a learning curve involved in coming from the industry from a non-consulting background, and then, for example, speaking the way I'm speaking right now. So when I got into consulting 6 years ago, I came from the construction industry, very rudimentary, very backward in terms of soft skills, right? Typically, all of the skills that I have right now, I have picked in, day out, mimicking my seniors, going through trainings and training programs. You're taught again, your resources are available to you. So there is definitely a learning curve involved, but I don't think it is steep. Now, to answer one more point that you talked about, Shrikala, is project to project, there is a learning curve, yes. So as we speak, I am thinking of a retail project, a construction project, a healthcare project, and all of these industries are very different from each other. So when I'm speaking to the client, I need to speak from that particular context and particular industry, because it cannot be generalized, right? And then you have to bring in the context of the company as well. So you need to be able to, at a short period of time, assess what is happening in that industry, form your hypothesis, test your hypothesis, and be able to sound dangerous enough to have a conversation.
Right. So, more from how a person grows in a consulting role, right? Another thing that people talk about is to understand how meritocratic is a consulting life, right? If you look at a career, like for example, if I say that if I look at the technology industry, right? So typically, say a pre-MBA kind of a role, somebody joins as a software engineer, goes to become a senior software engineer, and then maybe goes to a team lead, and then goes to a project manager, and then becomes a technology architect, or then maybe going through a director technology and a CTO kind of a role, right? So this is typically a process that people follow in a in a technology kind of a career. How does this work in consulting, and how many years typically does it take for someone to get into, say, becoming a partner role, which is pretty much the highest level you can get to in consulting? How many years does it take?
Consulting firms will hire in the band which is associate, senior associate, where your job is actually to do the analysis, to do the research, to do the number crunching, to prepare the models. You are the how would you say, you are the engine that is working in the background, right? And think of it as a funnel. So you start as an associate, senior associate, then you become a manager, where you're specializing in one particular skill, right? Because you can't be the jack of all trades unless you're doing something which is like shared services design, which is applicable everywhere, right? You have to be industry specific. You have to be specific to a particular type of problem that you're solving ultimately, right? So you are going towards manager, and after you become manager, senior manager, and then you branch out again as a partner. So it's like an hourglass kind of a model. So at the bottom, you are the associate, senior associate, you're doing the engine. When you become the manager, you're actually handling the projects. As you become senior manager, you start talking to the client and selling. And then you become partner, you're actually selling and getting more work. And that's typically how it goes. Now, I have seen anywhere between 10 to 12 years for people who joined as a business analyst. Some of my colleagues in ISB who joined some very big consulting firms as a analyst or the starting level associate, have this year made partners, which is 10 years, right? Having said that, it also depends upon your performance, economic, the environment which is around you, so on and so forth. But I would say 10 to 12 years is a good time frame, and there is a reason for that, right? At every level, you have to prove that you are performing at the next level. You're suitable for the next level, right? And not only do we have to do that, you have to be a culture fit as well for the kind of organization that you work for. And each of the consulting firms has their own way of doing things. So for you to actually start going from manager to director to partner, or whichever levels are there, requires that much amount of experience in that particular firm, that much amount of support from the industry and the network that you build, that kind of propels you towards the senior levels.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Right. And I would like to add to that. So what also happens is, say, for example, when you go from a associate to a senior associate, right? Your focus, maybe you're working with a specific kind of a client, focusing on doing data analytics or creating analytical models for these specific clients. When you become a manager, maybe you're focusing on working with managing that particular account. When you're a senior manager, maybe you're managing multiple such clients and accounts, and when you or maybe when you're at a director and a partner role, you're also responsible to bring in more business, right? And that is also one reason why they are very specific about having MBAs recruited, because MBAs also bring in a lot of network with them, and this network that they bring in with them is also a way to get in more business for these consulting companies, because that's how they can reach out to people from other kind of companies and other kind of roles, right? So that is also one thing that when you go higher up the ladder in a consulting role, that they can leverage.
So let me just address that particular point, Shrikala. MBA is the minimum threshold that you need to have to get into consulting, right? And if you're talking about the MBBs of the world, the tier 1s or even the tier 2 consulting firms, you definitely need to have an MBA even to get hired at a associate level. Now I'm talking about strategy consulting specifically. Right? You can be the absolute god of JavaScript, and they can hire you in technology consulting. Right? There you may or may not need a MBA. And what typically happens in consulting firms is there are two or three parallel tracks. Every consulting firm that I have seen so far is some or the other associated with technology for sure, right? I am a real estate guy. I've done construction, but I'm implementing technology for real estate organizations. Okay, so there is a strategy component to it. That is how the business works. What are the KPIs? What is the process look like? Who is going to do what? The operating model, all the jazz that you have around strategy consulting. And then there is a parallel that is actually the technology consultant, right? Who is in what kind of technology? What is the solution? What is the architecting? Who is going to do what? What is the agile PMO method, right? And these are two tracks. So what you see as a hierarchy on the screen right now, there is a hierarchy on the strategy side for which MBA is the minimum threshold that you need in order to get into that and in order to grow. You just simply cannot grow like that, right? Right. And then there is the parallel track, where is the technology track, which has the reason why it has been separated out from the strategy is because, of course, the work is different, the responsibilities are different, the pay grade is different, and there is a lot of other complications which are there, right? So for the technology track per se, you do not need an MBA degree is not compulsory, but it does add value as you climb up.
Right. So on that point, we have another aspect, right? That most people who spend a lot of time in a consulting industry also are people who gain a lot of skills. They because they have an experience. So say, for example, if they are working in an industry agnostic consulting kind of a company where the idea is not to specialize in something, but you might want to be jack of all trades. They travel a lot. Like somebody mentioned, work-life balance is something that goes for a toss, which also means that a lot of people who pursue consulting as a career, because they are pretty much working 16-hour days and 4 days a week traveling kind of a role, there is always an exit that they look at, right? Like what point? And this is also one point where most consulting companies, when they hire from an MBA also, most cases look at younger applicants, right? Younger experienced people. What is the truth around this aspect that headhunters are behind you once you have, say, a tag of a consulting company on your resume? How much truth is to that kind of a statement?
I don't think that is true. And the reason I don't think that is true is just because you are from MBB, that does not mean that at an analyst level, people will, the headhunters will really come after you, right? Ultimately, what matters, even whether you are in the industry or whether you're abroad, is what value add are you actually bringing to that particular role. Now, if you are an analyst in a consulting firm where you have done Excel modeling, made PPTs, and basically done the groundwork, what value add do you bring when you go out to the industry? You don't have specific skills, right? But if you have spent 10 years doing healthcare consulting specific, in and out of the healthcare consulting world, because you could work with J&J, you could work with Novartis, you could work with Dr. Reddy's Labs, you could work with Himalaya, you could work across the thing, but in healthcare only. Then companies will pick you up because of if I go and work tomorrow in L&T or Nagarjuna or whichever organization, a construction firm, I will be specific to that construction firm. But if in consulting, what the advantage it gives me is, because if I can choose an industry and the specialization, I can work with all the 15-20 big names which are there in a particular industry. I know how the operating model works, I know the competition works, I know all of that, right? That is the value add that I'm bringing on the table when I'm going from the consulting world to the industry again.
Right. So I think we pretty much address the next aspect also, right? Which is one aspect is the specialization part. The other aspect is the experience that you bring with the specialization, right? So typically, say for example, I would like to pick a few examples from the audience here, right? So for those who want to just kind of do a quick evaluation of what do you think whether you're cut out for consulting, right? So I have one example already put on the chat window where Sidesh says, I'm from a technology consulting industry working for 3 years in a boutique consulting firm. So ZS is a boutique consulting firm, pharmaceutical focused. I feel I'm more cut out for strategy consulting. Can I make move into say an MBB without an MBA? Right. So let's answer the skills that Sidesh brings to the table. This is pharma or kind of an consulting option. He wants to move to a strategy kind of a role. With MBA or without MBA?
With MBA for sure. Because you want to make the move from technology to strategy consulting, right? So, and I can tell you the reason why. You're talking about, what is the store procedure for this particular thing to work. You're talking about what are the data connectors, what is the integrator and all of that. You're coming from that level. And then you're going to a level that says, how does this tool application help with your overall strategy? What is the business case for implementing that solution? What is the ROI? What is your payback period? What is your IRR? How do you develop the case? How do you convince the client? How do you actually go and build that particular language, that skill set, that particular aspect, and that only comes from an MBA. So if you want to shift from a technology consulting role into a strategy consulting role, you definitely need to have an MBA. And many of the people that Shrikala, correct me if I'm wrong, we coach for this kind of a shift have the same example that I believe Sidesh talked about.
Right. Any other? So I think we have one more. So I'm currently working in a steel industry, experience in operations, maintenance, and procurement. Right. Very interesting. Total 6 years experience. Am I suited for consulting? Right. So I think I would like to, take a stab at this aspect. Right. So first of all, one aspect working in a steel industry, which means there's a lot of scale that you're working with, a lot of compliance and process that you're working with. When you're looking at procurement, which also means it's supply chain. So you're also focusing on different levels of supply chain, maybe some parts, because procurement is what you're focusing on. When you're saying maintenance, which also means there's a diverse kind of audience that you're catering to, more in terms of the people you manage, right? Mapping this to say a consulting kind of a project, right? So Yash, maybe you can take a stab at mapping it to a consulting kind of a project. How can this person look at showcasing himself as a value to a consulting kind of a role?
So I think definitely having operation, maintenance, and procurement, talks to so many different verticals in an organization, which is a really good experience to have. And 6 years of experience is a decent experience to have as well, right? So I have seen various roles in the consulting world that talks to all of these verticals, and there's definitely a market there for such consulting roles. And I'm not just talking about my firm right now, but overall, right? From what I see in the industry. So definitely there is value add in the experience. But think about this, and this is something that I want to tease to the audience as well. Consulting is a lifestyle choice. It is not only just, I have done heart surgery, so can I get on a project that involves heart surgery? It doesn't work like that, right? And maybe we touched on it on some part of the conversation that we have. It's literally, you have the experience, you're molded in a shape in a particular way, and then you go ahead and implement those particular technology, those particular projects, and you work on those particular projects. So it's a mindset, right? So you have your experience, great. Then you have the mindset of thinking like a strategy person, your frameworks, all of those great stuff. and that's what makes you suitable for consulting. So there is a gap in between that the MBA fills and then the training that you acquire when you go into consulting firm fills.
I wanted to show you an example of some of the students that we have worked with who've moved to consulting roles over the years, right? And very interesting the way each of these are from different kind of schools. So a lot of people who say that only top schools get MBB kind of an options, that's not true. But at the same time, what are the kind of roles that are possible for you even post MBA? So like, for example, the first person that we have was someone who did an MBA from Ross, which is Michigan, was a senior software engineer in his previous avatar, went on to do an MBA from Ross, got to getting into McKinsey as a consulting role, moved back from an consulting role to now product management as Google, right? So this is one example where from a consulting kind of role, we spoke about how people transition back to different kind of roles. That is one. Somebody from IIM Lucknow, right? Where again, started with a senior software engineering role, but now managing the data analytics manager at BCG, right? So that is another option. Somebody from an army background who's recently joined an MBA school at Tuck, now getting a summer internship at McKinsey. We have Dalima, who had like a prior consulting. So we had someone who's already from a consulting kind of a role, right? Worked as a consultant at ZS. So similarly, I think she also was from ZS or one of these boutique consulting firms. Got to do an MBA from McCombs and now working with a completely different Alex Partners kind of which is a restructuring consulting kind of a role. Similarly, somebody with a CA kind of a background did an MBA from McDonough. Again, if you look at the variety of the schools also, right? Somebody is Ross, Tuck, McCombs, McDonough, right? Again, very different set of schools with very different kind of backgrounds who have moved into getting into very strategic consulting kind of a role. In fact, I just spoke to Darshan just a couple of days ago, and he was talking about how I was asking him whether his CA background is actually helping him in his consulting role. So he specifically works on restructuring projects, which is like, for example, there is some company which is going bankrupt, and reviving them and getting them to a point of sustenance is what his job role is. And these are really turnkey projects, like 3 to 4 month kind of projects, right? So these are the kind of projects. So just to give you an idea that it is possible to get into various consulting roles, you can be one of them. And so it's not that somebody has to come for the very specific background or a specific role to get into consulting, right? With that, I also want to give you an idea about different kind of profiles and roles, and I want to introduce you to our application mentors. So we have these mentors are from different kind of colleges, done an MBA from all these top schools, who have been with us over the years, working with students, applying to top schools abroad. They specialize in different kind of things. Somebody is a product manager, somebody is a sales head, somebody is a strategic management head, somebody works with Deloitte after Rotman. We have somebody from Australia, I am Ahmedabad, Darden, I am Cambridge, who are again into various strategy roles or consulting roles post their MBA. We also have people from Ivy School, which is another top school, and also schools like technology, different profiles such as technology specialization. Somebody from Haas, who's already a McKinsey consultant, who is working with us as a Crackverbal mentor, right? So any thoughts on that, Yash, more around the diverse profiles that people get into post MBA, maybe other than consulting also is an option?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I don't think just because you are a CA or a CFA, or you have done XYZ, you get into consulting. I have had experience of some of my close friends who was a research analyst who got into consulting, who was a army major who got into consulting, who was a physicist who got into consulting, right? And I think one of the questions over here was, I have seen someone from the clinical industry get into consulting and then move to a pharma company on a very high position also, And of course, they were all. But the common thing over here, the common denominator over here, is they were all of my classmates in ISB, right? So that is the transition, and that is a platform that you get to propel your career.
Right. So here, let's talk about the different kind of consultings, right? So there is strategy consulting, operations, real estate, sustainability. So what we've done over here is also put in the companies that fall into these categories, right? Now, somebody asked like BCG, what is MBB? So it's McKinsey, Bain and BCG. These considered to be the top ones when it comes to consulting. Then in operations consulting, we have Accenture, Deloitte, or sustainable, we have Britspan. So different kind of consulting roles are there. So what makes them specialize in, so is it that, are these all, when they say when the company says, or when a consulting company says they specialize in sustainability and impact consulting, is it because all the clients that they work for are in that kind of business challenge area? What are the typical challenges that they are facing?
There's a reason for that, Shrikala. Basically, that is the target segment, right? So think about this, and let's talk about the consulting world, and allow me to disperse some gyan on a Friday night. Think about an interior designer who starts his own consultancy is going to do interior design, right? A CA specializing in organization, the finance related stuff in major organizations, has a consultancy, it's going to do that particular business, right? Now, the world of consulting is nothing but you're providing services, you're providing value add, or the exchange of value add to a customer base that needs it. And you have certain service and skill sets at your disposal that you bring to the table, which are then recruited by the company that actually needs them, right? So it is nothing more different than someone setting up their own consultancy firm. The reason why they play in one particular area is because that's a strong point, and that is where they want to operate.
Right. So we have a very interesting question over here. It says, do we need to choose our specialization in consulting during our MBA, or is it, is it something to do with my pre-MBA experience?
No. Over a period of time, not to get into too much of philosophical discussion, you kind of realize where your liking is, right? But having said that, I have seen people choose their specialization in MBA because they have not got an opportunity to study that subject or be exposed to that subject in their previous experience. So for example, even though a lot of my ISB colleagues were not passionate about finance, they chose finance as a subject of specialization because they knew that it was A, their weak point, B, they never got a chance to do it and they would never get a chance to do it again, and they somehow thought that they would miss an opportunity to choose that particular specialization. Someone traditional like me who knew exactly what he's going to do the minute he stepped into ISB, I chose my specialization because I knew that was it, right? I was not going to go anywhere else. So to answer that particular question, yes, when you graduate out of the B school, you have to have your specialization, but no, it is not dependent upon what you have done previously. There is one caveat to consider, however, is that when you go and talk to people in your interviews, there has to be some thought process on why you chose a specialization, right? So you're a finance guy, you specialize in marketing, and now you're trying to apply for an operations role. That's silly. That's something you need to consider. That's all I would say.
Right. Interesting. So, which also means that clarity of goal is not when you need to apply for an MBA, but also while doing your MBA and when you graduate after an MBA, clarity of goal is extremely important.
No, thank you for bringing that up. And I think you put a particular point on the slide. What are the skill set required for consulting?
Right.
Clarity of thought and structure is something that you need when you go into consulting, because that is something which can be taught for someone like me who was all scatterbrained before I got into consulting, and now I'm completely different and I talk in frameworks. Of course, that's an acquired skill, But that is what they look for when you are stepping into your case interviews. And I think that's a great segue to the slide. So what if you're sitting across the table and I have to evaluate you as a consultant, what is it that I look for, right? I look for analytical skills. I look for ability to break down problems. And I definitely look for clarity of thought, right? What is the rationale? What is the logic behind the answer that you are giving? What is the structure in which the answer you're giving? How are you articulating that structure? Because in a case interview, there is literally no right or wrong answer, right? And you're taught that. They're not looking for, are you able to meet their answer to 3 decimal points? No, nobody bothers. What they're looking for is, were you able to understand the problem? Were you able to break down that particular problem? And do you have clear, simple, digestible, defensible way of arriving at where you arrived at? That shows clarity of thought. And that is important. That shows structure. That is important. Right? Because many of the times when you're sitting across not only your colleagues, your seniors, and the client, they're going to say, explain, how did you get there? Why is that relevant? And you will be continuously challenged on your thought process and the way you articulate going from point A to point B. And that is important, right? Yes, you need some kind of education, you need formal education background, right? People who survive in consulting longer than others are people who are, I would say we have slightly more ADHD than other people. we get bored of doing the same thing. So we want excitement. We want to travel. We want to work on 10 proposals at the same time and do a project work, right? Because it's exciting. Let's do something different, right? Let's try to set up this. Let's do that XYZ and all of that good stuff, right? That is important. And as I mentioned, addressing the last point, as I mentioned, you're thinking of a CA setting up an own consulting firm, right? Think about any consulting firm as a framework or an organization structure that is getting people with certain skill sets and marrying them with client needs outside in the industry. Okay? If you have a skill set and if you have a need, this is a 2x2 network. There is demand and there is supply. If people don't know what is it that you do, that is, you don't network, how do you grow? Because ultimately the demand that you bring into the firm and how you supply it is going to make a difference on how you grow in the organization. And that is where the value of networking comes in. And let me stress on this point. Strategic networking is important. Not talking to everybody on the floor because you want to network is important, right? Understanding why you want to network, how you want to network is important.
On the other aspect, right? So we spoke about case interviews, right? What is a specific, when we are looking at saying that, people are getting, I was talking to someone and they said they have multiple coffee chats when they are looking at consulting interviews. They have to do case presentations, they have some assignments to do, they have multiple coffee chats with different levels of people, right from a team person to a hiring manager kind of a thing. What is a trait that they are looking for when they are saying that, okay, is this guy or person fit to be a consultant? How do you assess that this person has, okay, maybe with the data of academics and how they've done in their MBA, you can get their analytical skills, but more from the consulting DNA perspective, right? Where somewhere you have to be extremely articulate also about what you're trying to say. When I say articulate, it's not only about communication, but it's also about putting your thoughts properly on a presentation or a document or a proposal to a client, right? So how do they identify these aspects when they are interviewing someone for a consulting role?
So every person that you talk to in that environment is actually evaluating, for sure. Right? And they go back and they fill their Excel sheets. But the answer boils down to 2 things. At least that's the way I would like to think about it. And this does not apply to the firms that I've worked with or I'm working with so far. The main question that I'm looking for, if I'm a senior person talking to the junior person, is three things. Typical consulting terminology. Can I put him in front of a client? Right? That's important. The client pays top dollar. So if you have a client who's paying you $600 an hour, you would want someone who can talk to the client, right? That's what they're assessing. They're assessing how you're speaking. They're assessing how your body language is. Do you come across as too aggressive? Do you come across as too meek? Ultimately, what matters is, can I put you in front of a client? The second thing is, are you likable? It's important because this industry is all about communication. It's all about meeting people. It's all about getting things done. It's uniquely different in its own way, and you would not have the growth that you desire if you're not seen as at least likable, approachable, with the kind of demeanor that you need, right? So, and the third thing is, would he fit into my firm culture? Right? Do I think this is a fit for the culture? So these are the three things that people will evaluate, and the reason why you have those networking events, networking parties, or people talking to you is to evaluate all of that. Yeah. That is where you make the impression, apart from just having your straight A's on your report card.
Right. Awesome. In fact, what I also did is I just wanted to share it with the people over here, right? So this is like a Bloomberg report which I got from the Bloomberg website. This is more around the number of consulting hires across top schools, right? So if you look at this, these are US schools, so the highest number from maybe when you hear that, okay, this school is great for consulting or that school is great for consulting. So this is across what is their median salary, across European schools, slightly lower ranking US schools. There are also schools in Europe. So if you see INSEAD over here, which is highest, right? So this is also because a lot of McKinsey guys get sponsored by McKinsey to do an MBA at INSEAD, right? So this is a slightly inflated number. It's not like normal people getting into consulting, but also consultants getting into consulting. Then obviously there are Indian schools too. If you look at, I think I saw Indian schools too in this list, right? So a lot of schools. So if you look at, say, ISB, there's a huge number that says people get into consulting, like a lot of, again, different kinds of consulting. We are not looking at, like we said, we looked at various aspects, various kinds of consulting companies, right? Not only MBBs, but also boutique consulting firms or, big or small consulting firms, right? So that is also one thing. So in fact, what you guys can do, in fact, we will be sending you the list of the kind of schools that you could look at, and what is the typical kind of consulting seats or people that get into consulting from this role, right? So all right, so what I can do now is, we have 5 minutes left. Let me just take questions. I have 2 questions. I will pick questions even from the people who have listed on the chat window. I think 2 questions that are there on the Q&A is already answered, but let me pick Chetan's question. It says, I have 13.5 years of experience, IT experience, working as a technical architect in Shell India, predominantly working with retail and CPG domains. Can I get a consulting role? Will 13.5 years be a hurdle for me to get into a consulting role post MBA? Your thoughts, Yash?
There is no straight answer over here, but typically what I have seen, this is just my opinion, I have seen from the MBA a more younger demographic getting picked up. I have also seen someone with a senior experience, such as 13, 14, 15 years, picked up at a senior level, but then the expectations are for to perform at that senior level, right? So when I came into consulting, for example, and of course I came laterally, I had 13 years of experience. So the expectations from me were very, very different and very, very high. So having said that, from the traditional route of your MBA placements, a typically younger demographic is picked up. However, there were certain exceptions that I have seen. But typically, that kind of a profile with that work experience is typically picked up laterally rather than recruited directly.
Okay, very interesting. And I think this is a very valid thing, right? When they talk about consulting, it's always about coming up with a solution to a problem, but they don't stay back to look at the execution aspect of it.
That's not true.
That's a very interesting thing.
I appreciate the candor over here, because that's not true. Consulting firms depends, and now everything will start with it depends, right? It depends on which firm you're in. And I remember I talked about the strategy vertical and I talked about the technology vertical, right? The two things. The reason why most of the big firms, the consulting firms, have done that kind of a parallel track is they want to talk about the strategy of implementing to the client, and then you have the technology folks on their payroll who are actually implementing things for the client, right? So a lot of consulting firms have realized that they have to not only stay back to implement their solutions, but they also have to stay back to make sure that that implemented solution is managed. And this is not only for technology. In fact, we strive for doing the strategy and the assessment work, the implementation work, and then do maintenance and follow up for that.
How do you measure the success then? So when you say, measuring the success of this implementation, so maybe that is more around the metrics of the success of the problem or the business challenge that people are working on.
I think it depends upon how you're defining success as a consultant, right? So if you're talking about career-wise, you progressing through the ranks of a consulting firm definitely means that you are doing something right. Okay. If you are measuring yourself as to your impact on your client as a consultant, you will be able to, if you are getting the client to do what you're telling him to do, which trust me is the hardest part ever. I would say you've arrived at the holy grail of being a good consultant, right? So there are three different things, and I know we are at time, just humor me for a minute. Giving the client the aha moment, the eureka moment of, oh my God, I didn't think about this. Well, how do I implement it? Well, this is how you implement it. And then you're seeing the client actually implement that. That's what makes a different, that's a good consultant.
Right. I have another very interesting profile, somebody who is an army officer with 20 years of experience. I have a specialization in geospatial domain. I'll be applying for an MBA, applying this year, which means getting in next year. Will someone with my kind of a profile be employable for a consulting role? Pros, cons?
I think so, unless there is a specific need for that skill set in consulting, I don't think that consulting might be a good fit for you. Not to be demotivating in any way, because I have seen successes as defense personnel succeeding in consulting, and I have seen the other side as well. So it's a very big mind shift that needs to happen, and it depends upon that particular skill set, right? So had it been like retail, warehouse management and all of that, very transferable skill sets in the industry. So unless you have a specific project and it is selling in the market, so that means people are willing to buy services, again refer to that demand and supply, then it makes sense. Otherwise, I don't think it makes sense. That's my honest opinion.
Right. All right. So I think we looked at various aspects of consulting today. We looked at what are the different kinds of consulting, what are the kind of skills required, possible, not possible. I also shared a list of the median salary range, which is always the most interesting aspect that people are looking for. and at the same time giving you an idea whether it is something that is for you, right? I hope this webinar, this session was interesting. I hope we provided value for the 60 minutes of your time. Thank you so much everyone for joining us. Thank you so much Yash for joining us, and thank you so much Chetan. I'm so glad that you enjoyed this too, like the project management session. At the same time, I would also like to tell you that please keep following us for these sessions every Friday. Next Friday, again, we are looking at something around the experience aspect of it, and also for people who are looking at executive MBA option. We will be sharing that on LinkedIn and on our LinkedIn community. If you're looking at getting specific information about MBA and GMAT, please follow our LinkedIn community. Just search for Crackverbal MBA and GMAT community. Follow us over there, and you would be getting all information required for each of the profiles that you're looking at. Also, let us know if you want to evaluate your profile. We would love and will be happy to help you out. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a very nice weekend.